Welcome, everybody. My name is Stacy Fritz, and I'm the host of the Believe Big Food for Thought series. And I'm excited to be back with you. We've just come off an amazing weekend from our first Believe Big Cancer Symposium. I'm super excited that we rallied the troop, and we have Jen with us today to be able to cover this pretty important topic, very important topic. And I'm looking forward to digging into the content wrapped around anti-inflammatory eating. So as I mentioned, my name is Stacy, and I have the great pleasure of my friend Jen Nolan, who is the owner of Remission Nutrition, here with us today. And she's going to be co-hosting this episode with me. I'm really looking forward to learning more about anti-inflammatory. But just before we get started, I just want to remind all of us that today's conversation is pulling out the lens. We're looking at this content from a broad perspective. And if you do have questions about your own individual cancering journey, it's not that we don't want to hear them. Of course we do, but I'm going to ask you to hold specific individual questions, and then we'll be able to talk about how you reach out to not only Believe Big, but Jen Nolan herself directly. So that said, I'm going to pass the baton to Jen, and I have a Kickstarter question to ask you, which is to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about today. Could you just give us an overview of what it means to eat in an anti-inflammatory way? I'll say it like that. What exactly does anti-inflammatory eating mean?
Yeah, I think it's really cool to even start back up a little bit and say, what is inflammation?
Mm,
So, what is inflammation in the body? Because we need inflammation to happen in the body for certain things, right? If we get a wound, whether it's a sprain, say it's a sprained ankle or a cut arm or something like that, we need inflammation to happen because that activity creates healing. So there's this acute inflammation that can happen, and then there's chronic inflammation into the body is what we don't want, right? That's where we might feel a lot of inflamed joints, where we have joint pain, knee pain, elbows, whatever it is. Also, just an inflammatory process in the body that can be really tough for, say, heart health.
mm,
Right. So, cancer, when we talk about cancer, we do not want chronic inflammation in the body because one of cancer cells' superpowers is that they love an inflammatory environment. So, cancer cells that we don't want they thrive in inflammation. Normal cells that we want do not thrive in an inflammatory environment. So,
That's a
that's
little bit confusing, really, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that there is this part of inflammation that we definitely want. And for our listeners, that would be like when you stub your toe and it gets all red, like the Fred Flintstone toe. It's a body reaction that actually signals the body that, hey, we need to go in there, we need to protect, we need to take care of. But what you're saying is the inflammation that we're talking about is long, systemic, under the radar. We don't necessarily see the swollen toe. It's this inflammation that's running low level in the body that we may or may not notice a lot. Do I have that
yeah.
fairly?
Yeah, and if you think about it, even a chronic condition like arthritis, if you hear an itis,
Mhm.
that is inflammation, right? So that would be a not very desirable inflammatory process in the body, right? Just to back up with that, and then knowing that we can do certain things in our life, eat a certain way, maybe we move a certain way that can really be helpful in promoting this anti-inflammatory process. Okay, so big picture, an anti-inflammatory sort of way of eating would be eating foods that do not promote inflammation, right? Food.
Great.
So a food might be a fatty fish. So wild caught salmon has these amazing fats that promote or do not promote inflammation. They are more anti-inflammatory, called omega-3 fatty acids. So fatty fish it's a perfect example of eating an anti-inflammatory way or an anti-inflammatory food. Go ahead.
So I might be jumping ahead, but I'm curious based on the questions that I get. Is it a fair statement to say you use the example of the wild caught salmon? Are there examples of foods that could be inflammatory to one person? as opposed to another. And again, if I'm jumping ahead, Jen, you can stop me there, but I just want to be really clear with our listeners. This comes down to, and I'll say it ahead of time so nobody gets annoyed with you. Nobody likes the word it depends. And
Right.
nobody likes that ever. But honestly, I feel like with the nutrition piece, mostly, I find myself saying, I know you don't want to hear this, but it really depends, which is the reason I'm teeing you up for that beautiful Naisha quote,
Mhm.
assess,
Yeah.
don't guess. So, did I get that right that some things can be inflammatory and we may not know until you get to the part where you're going to tell us how we know?
Exactly. And that is a common answer to a lot of questions, right? It does depend. It's very individualized. And with some folks, we hear a lot about nightshades, right?
Mm,
Nightshades are peppers. So they might be bell peppers, they're tomatoes, eggplant. So for some people, nightshade vegetables could be more inflammatory. What I find with folks, it's like the how do you tell?
yeah.
Try it and then you assess. And the way you would assess, I would say with that particular food would be to feel into your body. How do I
Mm,
feel? Because for some folks, and this is another way to do it, it might be not to try it, but to take it out. So say
mm,
I eat a lot of tomatoes and I have really achy joints. My hands hurt, my knees hurt, my elbow, everywhere. It just aches in the joints. I can take out these nightshade vegetables and see if it makes a difference. For some
mm,
people, it might, and for some others, it won't. And so
mm.
don't take nightshades out just because you hear, oh, those are bad for inflammation or for
Right.
arthritis. They might not be for you. And then if we take out tomato sauce, we're missing out on some potentially really healthy food and
Yeah.
nutrients.
Okay, so let's back it up a little bit and let's get on this foundational layer. Let's pretend we have one of us on the call and we don't know what we don't know. Can you kick us off with, let's pretend like we've done no testing, none whatsoever. We don't know exactly what's happening with the person, myself, you, whomever. Can you guide us through a common anti-inflammatory, I don't want to say diet, but if I wanted to do a better job and reduce the amount of inflammation by way of foods without the testing, is there an entry point into this conversation, like a plain anti-inflammatory diet plan, however we look at it, and then we can start going deeper if it's not working? Where
For
would
sure.
we even start with anti-inflammatory eating?
Yeah. Many of you already know one of my favorite kind of ways of eating would be more of a Mediterranean style diet, right? And there's so much research on the Mediterranean diet. I love it because it fits everybody,
Right.
right? And so it's in my world, a Mediterranean diet would look very nutrient dense, but more plant dense. So not plant only, plant dense. So we want to eat a rainbow of vegetables, right? So more color, you're going to get more nutrition. Fiber, super important. So not juicing out. We've talked about juicing before, but not juicing out the fiber. We need that fiber for a balanced meal. So then for protein, our proteins would come from maybe more lean proteins, very high quality protein. Remember how important that is. We are what we eat, but we are what our food eats. So if our food is out there eating inflammatory things in their diet, then they're going to pass that on to us. We're going to feel that.
Is that your quote? Because I really, we are
Is
what we
it
eat, but we're
good?
also
I don't
what did
know.
you? Wait, I may
I'm
have
not
to
going to
say,
take credit for
quote by Jen. That is, I like that. We are what we eat, but we're also what the animals.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
So if you think about that just real quick, if you think about animals that are not out grazing, they're not out eating what's more natural to them, and they're being fed things that are not overly natural to them, that's not that great for the animal, and then it's not going to be that great for us.
Yeah, Jen, for our listeners that were not able to join us either remotely or in person, Jen was one of our fabulous keynote speakers at the symposium this weekend, and she actually talked a lot about this. And it was interesting by way of this Mediterranean diet and understanding that all of us need an entry point in
Mm.
what we're trying to do. What we don't want to do is start throwing things against the wall and see if that works and this works and that works. So I really like the approach of we think mostly this Mediterranean style nutrition is good for most of us. And so for me, when I hear that, I think, okay, that is a really great place to start with somebody of the things that we're going to include. And so what you mentioned was these eat the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, excuse me, mostly vegetables, but I loved the word that you used at the symposium, more plant forward, but we're not dismissive of the lean protein of high quality animal sourcing there. And then, of course, mentioning as much of this lovely, gorgeous fat that we
Yes.
can get in. So I know, based on my experience in working with others, that when you say the word fat, we're still caught in that chirping of the ear that fat, all fat is bad. And again, our viewers are incredibly smart and very well versed on nutrition, I believe, but just to make sure that we repeat. Fat is good for you. The right kind of fat is good for you, making sure that we don't overdo it because fat is still fat, but understanding the sourcing. I think you even mentioned and you teased about drinking olive oil, which we had another practitioner there whose family has an olive farm, which unbelievable connection on all accounts. But if that is what we want to start including into our daily nutrition, go ahead and take us on what that would mean by way of what are we going to put on the side or toss out or eat incredibly moderately or not sparingly or never? What would you give us the big, I hate to use the word no list because the second you say no list is the thing that you want the most. What is the thing that we are trying to, what is the thing that's inflammatory? What are the things that are inflammatory? How about we put it that way?
Okay, I like that. Can I say really quickly about the inflammation and the fat and this like kind of fat
Yes,
fear that still trickles into
yes.
a lot of us? So fat is very caloric, right? And so a lot of times people are like, ooh, fat bad, fat. No, we can't have that. That's going to make me fat. Not true. Fat can actually, if it's the right kind of healthy fat, like olive oil, can help us actually burn fat in the body. The other thing, and this is why I'm bringing it up, is it can also be very anti-inflammatory. So
Mm,
olive oil can actually help bring down, because of the beautiful nutrients in the olive oil, especially if it's beautiful olive oil from an olive oil farm or whatever, it can bring down the inflammation. But one of the most important things that I want to mention really quickly is the blood sugar regulation. So if
yes.
we are not eating fat, we can have a harder time regulating blood sugar. Blood fat will help balance our blood sugar, it will help with satiety, so we're not craving because we're not then diving with our blood sugar. So if
Mm,
we are spiking and dropping blood sugar all throughout the day, like this, we are going to have more inflammation in the body.
and
That's
that's the reason why that matters.
that's the
If
reason why
we
that
get
matters.
the highs and the lows, and so what you were referencing at the symposium is whether or not you choose to use a blood glucose monitor, the continuous glucose monitor for somebody who's on the cancering journey. It's still the same. Why does this matter? Why it matters is that we don't want to see spikes and we don't want to see dips. But for those of us who maybe have received from our doctor a pre-diabetic number or whatnot, the same rule applies. We want steady blood glucose levels. And one of the ways to measure them is these tools that, like I said, Jen mentioned, but understanding that this fat component, it's what do they call it? It's how you flatten the curve. One of the ways that we can flatten the curve. The other thing that I heard very clearly was and I hate to be the detail master on this one, but your sourcing of your olive oil also matters. If you go into the grocery store, you are confronted with a lot of different choices. And what I heard from both you and Dr. Rollis, I believe, was you want an expiration date and you want dark glass bottle, is what I also heard. Is there anything else that our listeners might pay attention to if we're going to drink our olive oil, which, by the way, I would really like to know, you don't really drink it. You are, what are you
I
doing
don't
with it?
personally because I get enough in my food. But
Yeah.
if but there are ways like you can put it into this like ginger turmeric shot,
Yeah.
and you can throw it down. It's
Hey,
not my
well,
way.
listen,
But
my family's Italian, so my
yeah,
husband would be on this call and he would say to you, Jen, I love olive oil because you know what? I love some cheese in there, some hot peppers, and then I take this big loaf of Italian bread and I'm a dipper. We're not talking about that. And I
Yeah.
just threw him under the bus, but that it would be something that Dave Fritz would absolutely say, I got that. I got the drinking of the olive oil, but that's
Doing
not
it
what you mean.
right.
That's not
Yeah.
what we're
Yeah.
using olive oil as like with our vegetables and our maybe as a salad dressing base. How
Yeah.
else besides your shots? What else?
Oh, I love it. You know me, I love a lot of herbs, right? Lemon zest. This is all me thinking about the Mediterranean diet. Olive tapenade with
Mm,
capers and a little bit of like sun-dried tomatoes with really good olive oil, basil, all these things. That's how I bring it in. I am a little bit careful with, I've had this kind of debate with a lot of people about olive oil and cooking it. So
mm,
there's a lot of times,
right.
so the deal with cooking with olive oil is that it likely, especially if it's this high quality olive oil, it can withstand heat. However, the polyphenols, which are these incredible anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer nutrients that are in olive oil when it's that really yummy, good olive oil, don't necessarily hold up to heat. They might protect the olive oil a little bit when we heat it. So for me, I think of olive oil being used in the what I would say the cold kitchen.
Oh,
So I use other fats when I'm cooking. Once in a while, do I use olive oil? Sure. If I'm cooking really low heat, which I recommend anyway, then sure, some olive oil. It's not going to really trash those polyphenols. But I'm like, if we're spending all this money on this gorgeous olive oil and we're
yes.
getting all these polyphenols, then why trash it with the heat?
Mm.
Okay.
Would
So
an example of a high heat one be like an avocado, when you call a cold
yeah.
kitchen, which I love that term, could you
Mhm.
switch for the hot kitchen? Could it be like an avocado oil? You would swap out that way?
Yeah, you can use avocado oil. I like to use coconut oil, depending. Like when I make, say, cauliflower rice, I might cook that in a coconut oil, especially if it's going under curry, right? So that flavor is going to be there. Coconut oil can heat grass-fed butter and ghee, right?
Oh,
Those two as well you can cook in. So it just again depends. I always say don't use just the same oil all the time. Mix it up. Diversity is critical, and that goes for all of this beautiful Mediterranean sort of anti-inflammatory way of eating as well. So the
love it.
things that we want to take off the list as best we can is there is this it's been said for so long when you go into the market, into the grocery store, how they talk about spending your time on the perimeter of the store. Doing that alone will help you get rid of these more inflammatory foods, which are processed foods, things in
Yeah.
a box, right? So processed foods are really important. Oils, so seed oils, we talk a lot about various oils like canola oil, soybean oil, even flaxseed oil. I know a lot of people like to use that. Be careful with that. It can go rancid pretty quickly and be more inflammatory to the body. So I
Mm.
like ground flax, but I don't love to use flaxseed oil. What else? Canola, I said, corn oil.
Vegetable
Thank
oil, all
you.
of this. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you see those things, don't use them, get rid of them, and use the other oils that we talked about. That right there can help with anti-inflammatory. If you eat out a lot, then know that the chances of you getting these more inflammatory foods are going to be better.
So I'm not calling her out, but I am a little bit. Lynette, who's on our team and also on the call, she was just mentioning too before that she and her husband eat the majority of their foods at home. And again, for our listeners, I'd just like to share by way of example, our team members and the folks that we have the pleasure to work with. There's something really interesting when we talk about home cooked meals, whether or not we're raising families or it's just the two of couple that considers staying home. And most people would think, oh gosh, with the price of everything, that would be the argument for you can save a lot of money if you don't go out to dinner a lot. However, in this example and in Lynette's example, you have the power and the control to know the thing that you are consuming. And even if you are trying to do a really great job and you travel for work like I do or you do, we lose that control. And so I think to myself, if I have a pending work trip that I'm going on, how much can I fill in the spaces so I'm not even sure how to say it, stepping down. I can choose pretty wisely while I'm away. There's really, in the United States anyway, it's pretty easy to find the thing. However, I don't make that assumption. And of course, when you go to a hotel, the breakfast is included. If you look at what those, I could go down the list and tell you there was not one redeemable quality of anything that I would ever consume, down to the water choice, down to the water choice. So for me, I appreciated what Lynette was sharing and how she and her husband have become, she said spoiled, but I say differently. I say really intelligent about making sure that you understand you lose a lot of control over the things that Jen is talking about by making the decision. And that's not to pick on our restaurants. I do think our restaurants are doing better. I'm not seeing it yet all the way. I don't know. Maybe Jen, she lives in Colorado. I feel like West Coast is doing a little bit better. East Coast we're catching up. West Coast, when I visit my son out there, I'm like, I have many more choices, farm to table. There, it's very open about where the food sourcing is coming from. And my hope is that we'll get that same thing on the East Coast sooner than later. Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Well,
about you, Jen, when you travel? Do you find that I'm not even talking about going to restaurants. I'm even talking like airports or staying in a hotel. Like, what do you do if you're committed to the anti-inflammatory or any plan? How do you make it easier on yourself?
yeah, it's really tricky. And I truly don't travel that much, thankfully. And what I try to do is go be really easy on myself. And I think that's important for all of us too. Like we do the best we can when we don't have as much control. And then when we are cooking at home, we're making different choices. So that's where at home, maybe we don't have those things, those temptations perhaps in our cupboard, because we might just get those things when we're out.
Yeah,
So that's one way. I talked about this in the talk too, but I do a fair amount of when I travel, I fast a fair amount. So if I'm in
yeah,
an airport, I don't really need to go and eat something. When I just traveled back, I was in the Baltimore airport and I was needing to get some food because it was going to be a really long travel day.
yeah,
And I ended up getting a salad and it had a dressing that very likely had a vegetable oil. And I have to just, oh, if I focus too much on it being, I'm not going to give it that label of, oh, this salad dressing is really bad for me. Because most of the time I'm doing really well. So hopefully
yeah,
my body's okay with that. When we're really sensitive, then it can be harder. If somebody has, I didn't realize this particular salad had some sort of bread in it. So I'm
yeah.
thinking, if someone were celiac, right?
Uh,
We're allergic to gluten, and so many people are gluten free and they do react. It's hard. So you need to then bring your own things with
Yeah, I eat so many vegetables and so much salad that for me, one of my non-negotiable is I think the brand is called, I'll look it up and make sure that we have put it in the show notes, but I travel with my own olive oil packs
it's
because
really
I eat some instead of assuming the dressing thing is just bugs me. I'd rather somebody bring me a lemon slice and use my own olive oil and then I'm done with it. And then I've let go of the fact that I know that it's not organic lettuce. I know that it's not organic, but like what you said, you don't want to get so to the place where you're not willing to travel and you're not able to have a good time and let it go. But the other thing I was going to say, I'm going to shout out for Danielle, who's also on the call. As many things as I attend, I have to be honest, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on the team, but next to never, even when we're talking about health and well-being, do you go to a conference where they're walking the walk. So in the example of the cancer symposium, the foods that were provided were
amazing.
intentional. The dinner was intentional. So much so that there's not really even a push for an alcoholic beverage, which I have to say, I think in our society, it is so hard. You use the word plant forward, I'd say health forward. If you really draw a line, that makes people really uncomfortable. But I have to say, our team, I really value the fact that when I'm going to something with Believe Big, it's Eva Lisa's direction to all of us, we're walking the walk. We're not just talking about using our own olive oil or not drinking or whatever the health tip is. And that's exactly what we're doing. So I say that to empower all of us is that there's always a decision to make, especially when it comes to food and you just do a little bit better than what you might have if you didn't know the information. And where there's a will, there's a way. And like I said, I feel like we are coming around the bend where people are starting to pay attention to it, and they very much do want the choice. And if you decide to go in a different direction, maybe that's available as well, but at least give people the choices in airports and restaurants to have the naked piece of chicken without making it a deal. You know what I mean? Like that should be a thing. That should be a thing that we should be able to order food in a way that doesn't make us look difficult. Anyway,
Feel difficult, right?
what's that?
And feel difficult. When you
Yes,
feel guilty because you're like, oh my goodness. But as we are asking for things that we would like to have, and as we are like what you did with the conference, having foods that you are walking the talk and you're showing that it's important and that it can be done.
right.
And I think it's so wonderful. And I think by doing this, we are educating others and it's just going to continue to catch
A
on.
ripple effect. I agree. I agree. So, for those of us who are on the call that are actively on the journey, some of these foods, and I remember clearly mom and my brother, some of these foods are really challenging for digestion, our fibrous carbohydrates, our broccolis, our cauliflowers, and whatnot. What would you say to somebody who is addressing anti-inflammatory eating in terms of a gentler approach based on the diagnosis and what they can tolerate? We know that it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's hard for the body to break down some of these foods. So what do we do if we still want to eat anti-inflammatory, but we struggle with some of the options?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that it depends on where somebody is in their journey. So if you are undergoing, say, chemotherapy treatment currently, and you're having a really hard time with digestion, especially with, I always call them the stinky veggies. Those are those cruciferous veggies
Yeah.
like the broccoli, the cauliflower, even just the act of cooking them sometimes can be off-putting and make us nauseous. But typically, if you're undergoing therapy, what we recommend and what I like to suggest is more cooked foods. So cooking the vegetables, because
Mm,
cooked, they're getting some help in breaking them down. So a cauliflower that is raw or broccoli that is raw is probably going to be far less easy to digest or break down than cooked. It
mm,
also might be more gas producing, so you might feel more bloat and things from that. If it's sauerkraut, some people can handle that, and actually it can be quite nice because it
mm,
also gives some probiotics, right? Those good bacteria. And again, because it's fermented,
mm,
it is more broken down, right?
mm.
So it might be more easily digested. So you don't need to sit and eat a bowl of sauerkraut, but a couple of forkfuls with a meal can be really nice. So what
Mm,
would I say? I would say, what if we did some soups that
mm.
had a nice bone broth, great for the gut as the base? We have some really high quality, say, chicken, and then we have some veggies in with the soup. And then maybe
Mm.
on the side, they have a couple forkfuls of the kraut, right? That could be a really nice meal. And what's nice about that particular recipe or whatever this chicken soup, it can also freeze really well. So you
Ah,
take it, because what happens is we get sick of it, right? Especially if we're on that nausea train, we get a little bit like, ugh, I don't want to have that again. But if you take it and put it into servings, I freeze in glass
yeah,
actually. And if you leave enough space at the top, it expands. Liquids expand when they're frozen, so you don't want to crack the glass. But if you leave enough space at the top, awesome. When you know you're going to have that soup in the morning, just set it into the fridge, let it thaw. Maybe the next day you eat it, heat it.
yeah.
So I love soups for that reason.
I remember when my brother was struggling with the eating thing, my mother had found this recipe, and all of us still very much enjoy it. She would roast cauliflower and use really good avocado oil on there. But when she went to put everything, she would really roast the heck out of the cauliflower, put it in the Vitamix. And then we would use bone broth to mix it up. Now, you could have roasted cauliflower soup, but interesting, he could tolerate small amount, and this is tough because he probably shouldn't have eaten. His stomach really bothered him, and he noodles were, and she would thicken up that cauliflower sauce, and it, strangely enough, it actually tastes a little like Alfredo. And who eats Alfredo anymore? I don't know. I'm sorry for my Alfredo lovers, but that consistency was very nourishing to him and very comforting to his stomach. He had colon cancer. And I do think that you can get really creative in the kitchen. I know that you are losing some of the integrity of the vegetable by cooking, but I got to believe that we're still on the right path, right?
Yeah, because if you're eating it raw and your body can't break it down anyway, then you're really losing the integrity of the veggie, right? So I
Right.
actually don't totally agree. There's with we think about that raw is better in terms of the nutrients, but there actually is a lot of research that shows example would be tomatoes. So we've maybe heard of that nutrient lycopene.
Yes.
Lycopene is actually more absorbable and more usable by the body once that tomato has been cooked. The research shows the amount of lycopene or available lycopene to the body is like massively more in a tomato sauce or a tomato paste than in a raw tomato.
Right. In that case, and pumpkin too, right? Like we're not that we're hitting up that, but I mean, that's really concentrated nutrients. Those would be two really great examples of cooking down. So again, I hate to use it, but it depends. Yes, the raw tends to be the preferred, but there is lots of argument that some varieties of vegetables are, if not at least the same, a little bit better. Tomatoes and pumpkin being one of them. Okay, I have two really, I'm going to pause for a second and make sure from the ladies, Danielle or Kristen, do we have any questions that we need to address? I want to make sure that we have quite a few people on the call today, and I just want to make sure that we're going at a pace that everybody's digesting it.
We have one question. Is steaming a veggie like that better than roasting?
A steam might be a little bit less, it might be more healthy. I'd have to really dig into the research if there, in fact, is research that shows that. Is it al dente or is it mush? Like how long has it been in there? So is it lightly steamed? Perhaps a light steam where you can still, it's more al dente. And it's going to depend again. Do I need it to be mush in order for my digestion to work with it? My guess, if I were to guess, you probably are holding on to more of the nutrients if you're lightly steaming versus maybe roasting. And what I say with roasting veg, we all really love that caramelized, right? Really overcooked vegetable in the roasting process. Turn the heat down and leave it in there for a little longer. Try not to use really high heat with any of our food.
Good. We have one more question there. Danielle, do you mind reading that one off?
I was also thinking avoiding ACSs in roasting.
Yep. And that would be that higher heat. So, you know how a lot of people have air fryers now?
Yes.
Turn your air fryer down. Like people want that crispy charred thing because it tastes good. That is where we can get these potential carcinogens in the food. It's important to keep it like low and slow. I love.
So give us those air fryers go up pretty high. And I hear you. Are we saying, and again, I'm not holding you to it, but we want things under 400, we want things under 375. We don't want to be in a broiling give us a metric, like something to judge
Yeah,
it by.
that's good. And again, I don't have the complete science on this. My rule of thumb is 350. My oven doesn't go above 350.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
my oven, if I'm cooking fish, especially high heat fish, it doesn't go above 270 or 275. So
Huh.
people think that's a little crazy. It makes the fish, it takes a little longer to cook. It makes the fish taste so much better when you just,
What do you put it at 275?
yeah, yeah.
Who knew?
It doesn't dry out. The inside's so nice. It's moist. The other thing I like to do is I like to use it's like a Dutch oven with a lid. So I like to put a bunch of things in my Dutch oven together and I just put it in the oven and I let it sit there for quite a long time at 350.
Kind
Whether
of like what is that called? The cookbook, the crock pot kind of meal that we're cooking slow all day long, right?
Yeah, and this doesn't even need to take all day long. It just might take a little longer if you had that oven up at 400, right? So if I put it in at 350, but I just put all of my things together in this little Dutch oven, it's so much fun what comes out of it. It tastes different every time. I use maybe a little bit of bone broth. I might throw in my cauliflower rice or cauliflower chunks or broccoli chunks or whatever. I might put in sliced onion, veggies, all the things. I might pour some coconut milk inside and then my chicken thighs. I like chicken thighs, skinless, boneless chicken thighs. They just taste better to me. But you can also do chicken breasts. You can put fish in, wild caught cod. Yeah, that's a favorite way for me to cook. I
Would
never
that be along the same lines, or is that what we're getting rid of with the Dutch oven with the one sheet pan meals? So you've just put it into the Dutch oven to avoid that high heat direction, right?
Yeah, and they talk about, have you ever heard of when you're cooking something with a lid on, you trap the nutrients and they stay inside? So I have that in my brain too. When I'm doing it, it stays, and then you're consuming the liquids. So when you're steaming, you're trapping the fluid, the moisture, but you're not consuming that inch of water that's on the bottom, or I'm not. I don't typically use that in something.
Very good. I love that. And of course, you're going to tell us at the end where you get your best anti-inflammatory recipes. But I want you to spend the last few moments on what I would consider one of the biggest culprits in inflammation. We really haven't talked about, and I hesitate by saying a bad guy, but when I work with people away from the Believe Big and the cancering route, one of the things I say is that we don't like to talk foods in terms of good and bad. But if I had to, and you pushed me and said, what is a bad food? For me, I feel like this big category of sugar really trips people up. And would you mind sharing your thoughts on just the general idea of sugar? Most people have heard sugar's not good for us and whatnot, but could you talk about how sugar plays a role in inflammation and what that means for us in terms of reducing it, eliminating it, how we should look at it in terms of inflammation?
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to before when I was talking about fat. Because if we're eating a high sugar diet, then we're going to be on what I would call a blood sugar roller coaster, likely, right? So we're having this sugar and we're getting this big, giant blood sugar spike. And remember, that process alone is inflammatory to the body, right? Sugar is a tricky one because it's emotional, it's addictive, it's highly addictive. So there's a lot of people that need to cut out sugar and not go back because they open up a little bit of a window or a door and it's like a floodgate. They can't stop because it's so highly addictive. Okay. So if you are you want to have a treat, it's a celebratory thing and you're going to have a treat, then I would recommend following the glucose goddess. I think she's brilliant. She's a French biochemist. You don't have to buy her products or supplements, all those things, but look at the principles. So be sure that if you are going to have something with sugar, that you will also have some fat with it and or protein. It can really help your blood sugar regulation. This isn't me saying go eat a bunch of sugar, but it can at least help support that blood sugar process, which remember in turn, if it's doing this, is inflammatory. Okay.
Look like the dessert that we enjoyed this past weekend. Would an example of that be like a chocolate mousse that the base was really about that coconut oil? That's where that she would have probably approved of a small, and they were this big. It was a tasting. It wasn't like a full plate of dessert.
And you're having it right after a meal. That's
Mm,
why dessert often comes right after a meal
mm,
because you've already eaten the protein and the fat in that meal and
yeah,
you have it right away. So you don't have this big window where it's 2 hours later and you're like, ooh, I could really use that chocolate ice cream right now.
right.
Because that's going to you're not going to have your body's not set up and ready for it, that
Makes
sugar.
sense. Makes sense. I'm
Okay.
going to pause here for a
So
second and
that's
make
part
sure
of
that
the
they don't have any questions for you because I feel like this is the topic, the sugar thing. You see anything, Danielle, that by way of anybody?
Going back to our previous topic, but is commercial bone broth as good as homemade? I find homemade too time consuming. I'm not very good at it. So are there any specific brands that are good?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of them. I buy the Kettle and Fire one just because it's the most accessible. They even have one that's now regenerative farmed or ranch, what would you say? Anyway, regenerative, which is a step above that grass-fed, grass-finished. So that's nice. I buy it when it's on sale. There are others out there that are certainly wonderful as well. I would say with most things, when we make something from scratch, it's likely going to be a step up. But does that mean I don't make it myself either because of the time consuming? And I'll be honest with you, I don't love the smell. So if I'm cooking it on stovetop, it's not very appealing to me. You can make bone broth in an instant pot, so it takes less time. So you could look that up, but certainly, yeah, you can buy good commercial bone broths.
Danielle, who asked that question? Because we have a whole episode on Paula Weinberg on how to make your own bone broth. So
Candace did ask the question, so you can.
Candace, feel free to go back onto the believebig.org page under resources and food for thought replay. And Paula did one. Now, I'm with Jen. The smell is you gotta appreciate it. I'll say it like that. I don't want to bash it because it's so good for you. I'm a bone broth sipper, but I'm not making it. And what also really tripped me up is the things that need to go into it, like some organic chicken feet and whatnot. And that's just not Stacy Fritz. I would rather not know. I just like to sip it. But yeah, please feel free, Candace, go back and watch that replay on there. In addition to that, as Jen mentioned, there is lots and lots of, I feel like we got it going on in the bone broth arena because there are quite a few companies. The regenerative, the Kettle and Fire is a great one. There's a bunch of bone broths out there that are completely organic, and Jen will tell you, and I hope that Jen will confirm that you got to turn that container around and you got to look at that ingredients. And we are looking for organic, filtered water, all the things that we talk about each and every month. We want really good sourcing of our chickens and really good sourcing of the other herbs and things that go into a solid chicken broth. That's important, especially if you're going to sip it. We're getting ready to head into those winter months, and I feel like the cup of warm bone broth it's like a little insurance policy that starts your day. You get some really great protein. I feel like that's anti-inflammatory. I feel like it's cold preventative. It just feels nice. It's true what you said. Your grandmother said, drink chicken noodle soup or drink chicken soup. That is for sure the ticket.
Yeah.
We have
And I
another
think
one, Danielle, before.
The reference to the previous episodes is in the chat, so they can get
Great,
those
thank you.
quickly. And also, we have a question. Can you speak to eggs being a good choice for an anti-inflammatory food?
Ooh, I can't wait to hear the answer.
I'm a fan of eggs. I love this question. There's something called the biological value of proteins. And it's the food people, the researchers have given these BVs or biological values to different proteins, and egg gets 100. It is numero uno, the best. Okay. So that's super cool and awesome. It's like the perfect protein with all these amino acids. And unfortunately, eggs can be inflammatory to some people. So here again, it depends. So if you look at what the top allergy foods or potential, like we look at soy, dairy, peanuts, eggs are on that list, right? So if somebody is really struggling, we are careful with eggs sometimes with inflammation. So I just had a client the other day. I was like, how many eggs are you eating a week? Because we're having a hard time bringing her inflammatory markers down. And I was like, she was eating eggs 6 days a week, 2 eggs. So she's getting quite a dozen eggs a week. That's significant, maybe. For some people, it might not be. So I was like, what if we go to 4 days a week and we figure out something else that you have for breakfast? Just see if that makes a difference. I don't want anybody to hear, oh, eggs are inflammatory, I shouldn't be eating them, because I do think they're a fabulous source of good protein.
They are the perfect protein, right? The perfect protein.
Vitamin A, omegas, again, you are what your food eats, right? And so remember, those eggs are coming from an animal that if it is eating junky food, then you're going to get some of those inflammatory things passed on. So quality is key.
Huge. Did that answer that question? Hopefully, yes. Okay. So as we round the bend, I promised you just 2. I'm going to give you both of them and let you answer them because I want to make sure that we honor your time and then the listeners' time. The first is, I want to know, and this is me personally, I want to know off the top of your head, what is your favorite anti-inflammatory meal? You don't have to give us like these specifics, but what is your favorite meal that you would consider under the umbrella of anti-inflammatory?
Okay. You want me to answer that now?
And then the
So,
second question, let me give you the second question. The second question is for those of us who are super interested in what we're talking about today and going in that direction, how would we take the step further to know if we have inflammation in the body that we might need to address? Those are the two questions.
okay. So I am a big fan. I do really love wild caught salmon. So that's probably my favorite anti-inflammatory meal. I will cook it, like I said, in the oven under lower heat. And then I always create a sauce. So I'm not a sauce like Alfredo sauce gal, but I'm a sauce like it's a chimichurri sauce or it's a herb sauce. And so that will always have maybe a little bit of garlic, unless we're sensitive to garlic. It'll have lemon zest from an organic lemon, a squeeze of lemon, some really good salt, herbs, right? I just put whatever herbs I might have in there, and I'll do a lot of really good olive oil. So now I'm adding that good anti-inflammatory to the top. I love capers. They're really good for us too. So I might drop some capers on top. I might put that on when I cook it, right, in the oven. And then it's going to likely be on a beautiful bed of greens with maybe some asparagus. That would be nice. Maybe some broccoli. So it'll always have a vegetable, a beautiful piece of fish, apple cider vinegar I use, and apple cider vinegar is something that can help maintain blood sugar,
Right.
help with the gut, and that's part of my dressing almost always.
Is that how
Okay.
you build out most of your meals when you're thinking about it? You're thinking about where's my lean protein coming from? And then how many different things can I add that fall in? Are you
Yeah.
doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner? That's really how you eat. That's how similar to how we tend to eat as well, is that I'm building out based on the choice on that lean protein and then
Yeah.
whatever fresh and organic that you can come by. The part that I think that, and again, I'm curious to know from our viewer standpoint, it's still, I'm a little shy on my olive oil. And I just haven't come over because again, when you have that indoctrinated in you, it's really hard to move away from high fat is actually more on the plus side than the problem is that you can't attach that big loaf of Italian bread that I was sharing with you earlier, because now you're getting into an arena. People are like, why can't I stay at this place where I felt good, not feeling like I'm gaining weight in a way that doesn't support my health and whatnot? Remember, fat is still fat, and we want to be mindful of what that is going on and with. I love that meal. Maybe you would consider sharing the chimichurri sauce because I'm sure there's a bunch of us that would really like to swat and take that from you. I would love to know what that recipe is. That's
Remind me, and I'll send that to you for sure. A chimichurri. And I'm one of those cooks that I don't always follow a recipe, but I do have some. There's also a book in terms of a resource. I really love the book, the New Mediterranean Diet Cookbook. It is also keto, but it's not super keto. And what I mean by that is that it has a lot of vegetables in it and it's very supportive. So it's more of this higher healthy fat, moderate lean protein, right? And very vegetable dense or vegetable forward or plant forward, right? What I might have with that meal that I talked about earlier is maybe a little avocado pudding. And I think we've shared that recipe before. That's avocado with cacao. And then I might drop a couple of raspberries on top. How
oh, yeah.
beautiful is that? So I'm always looking at how can I up level my meal? And
Yeah,
please know that I'm not perfect. Nobody is, right?
nobody is.
But I do the best that I can to go, oh, how can I add a little bit more nutrition to that? Always. That's
I think that you hit on a really super important point about this because, again, as I travel through the journey and listen to other stories, this is a shift. What you're talking about is a shift. You actually are smiling as you're talking about investigating how do I elevate my meal, which is a far different approach than, "Oh, I can't have that. That's not good for me." When you change the perspective of how do I change this meal because I know not only is it life-giving, it's not life-stealing, right? We're not pulling from health. It actually becomes this sort of fun investigation or discovery of like, how do I put all these things together? And then when you sit down and you eat and you see this beautiful array of God's unbelievable abundance on your plate, it is hard not to feel healthier. I hope that makes sense, but I get excited because Jen, you are smiling and glowing as you're talking about chimichurri sauce. And the majority, again, I can speak only from my history, but like watching folks try to adjust to a new way of eating sometimes feel sad and sometimes feel just like deprivation or I'm missing something or it's not fun food. And the reality is, I look at food the same way you do it. This is the opportunity, and this is the place where when people say they don't feel like they have control, this is the place that you do. It's an opportunity for you to fill up and feel like you are actively participating in your healing. And I just really, I applaud you for presenting in a way that is again, not doesn't feel like you're stealing something from somebody. This is actually a new way of addressing nutrition that is so supportive and gets out of the way of all the nonsense, like the fun foods, right? So thank you for that. I appreciate it. The last question for you is, what if somebody, and I'm surprised somebody hasn't asked yet, how do I know if I've got inflammation?
Right. Oh, I forgot about that part. That's good. So again, it's feeling into how you're feeling, right? Am I getting up in the morning and are my feet hurting, my hands, that can be an indicator, right? We can also look at different lab work. And so we talk about in our world, based on Dr. Nasha Winter's training, there are 3 markers that we look at. And again, I'm not a doctor and none of this is medical advice, but we can see it by looking at this, what we would call the trifecta. If these are outside of optimal range, we might be looking for some inflammatory processes in the body. So one would be LDH. So it's called lactose dehydrogenase. There's another one that actually is oftentimes looked at by folks that are looking at heart health, and that is HSCRP. That's high sensitive C-reactive protein. Okay. And then we also look at sedimentation rate, or SED rate. So if all 3 of those markers are outside of what I was saying is this kind of optimal level, then we're like, there's some inflammation going on in the system, likely. I would never tell somebody, oh, you're super inflamed, because that's not my place, nor is it my job. It's out of scope for me, but it just gives us information to know if somebody has some inflammation going on.
So the way I work around that is I'll say, you are so hot. You are so
Right.
hot. No, I'm just kidding. So here's what I know. Those 3 things that you just mentioned, LDH, HSCRP, and the SED rate. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is not a part of our traditional, if we're not on the cancering journey, that is not a part of the metabolic blood test panel that somebody would get once a year at their physical. I know this to be true, but because, again, with the family history that I have, I pay very close attention. I'm looking for things that I can do to support optimal health given my heredity. 2 questions there. How does one who's not on the cancering journey ask for those tests? 1, and 2, if you are on the journey, is that something that an oncology doctor, conventional doctor, is also looking for? Give us a way to take control over inflammatory markers that we might not know to ask or to pay attention. Is there another number on our traditional panel that we're looking at? Just give us a way to monitor and ask.
You can ask of anything, right? You can always ask what labs you might want. I like it if somebody is working with more of a naturopathic oncology doc. If you don't have cancer and you're working with a functional doctor, like there are many ways, and this again is getting bigger and bigger. It's more and more well known. So look at Function, I think it's called Function Health. And that is Dr. Mark Hyman. If you've heard of him, he was the medical director with, I think, functional medical director with Cleveland Clinic. He has a way where you join a membership. You get these labs, I believe it's twice a year. I could be wrong on that, but that's a way for you to get this lab work. And what's neat is they actually give a pretty cool report. This is more if I'm thinking about more prevention.
Yeah.
So that's a really great place to go. It's fairly reasonable. We at Remission Nutrition, we have access to a third party where we can order for folks. It's not me being, again, a doctor, but we have a panel. We've negotiated great pricing where we can do, it's almost like a nutrition panel. It's
Yeah.
quite a bit of lab work. So that's something that we do. We don't mark up our labs ever. I would want you to be a client, of course, of Remission Nutrition for me to do that. But
Yeah.
you can also, like I said, go to Function Health. You can ask your doctors. The problem that I see is they will say, I can order it, but your insurance might not cover it. And
Mm.
then you end up getting a big, giant bill.
Mm.
So when you go through these, there's other third parties. There's walkinlabs.com. There's Ulta Labs. There's even now you can go to Quest or LabCorp and order direct from them.
Oh.
So you can.
Goodness, people, do we hear this? Give me a high five on this. If we take control over our food, we got to take control over some of these. I love that, Jen. And of course, we will put the in the show notes for folks that, thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. I agree. I think the best thing that we have going for us is that we've got the ability to be not to be silly, to be the coach of our own health, be the person that's in charge and ask for what you need. But we need to know how to get into this. And so, Jen, I cannot, you know how much I adore you. I've told you a million times, but what I really loved about this conversation is all about being able to have some control in what feels really out of control. And if we just take these apart in bite-sized pieces, we can really sit back and realize that every time you open your mouth and you stick that fork in, that's a decision that you've made. And granted, we're all trying to do is do this little nuance, just do a little bit better every single day. And hopefully we'll continue on our healing for all of us, all of this healing journey. But the last thing is that, Jen, thank you for giving us the optimism wrapped around a conversation that feels very heavy to somebody who has got a million things to do to heal. And I feel like this feels like it was a fun thing, and I'm very grateful. I want you to have the last word, but I also want to mention to our listeners that Jen, you can work with Jen. I highly recommend if you need her. Jen, you're going to tell us your contact information, but you know that you can always reach out to us at Believe Big, and we'll put you right in front of Jen if you forget, what she's talking about. But Jen, any parting words? Tell us where to find you. Just bring it home and give us one big quote, like you said you are with what you were eating as well, because I'm going to quote you today. I loved that. I love that. I'm giving you credit for that. You are what you eat, and you're also what your animals that you're eating eat.
And I wanted to say too that this food is, yes, it's something that you can have control over. And it's not easy. So it's okay that it doesn't feel easy. It's not, oh, you can do this. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of things. And that's what we do. So at Remission Nutrition, you can go to remissionnutrition.com. We have a group that's called The Nest. We're starting again in October. It's a 3-month commitment. So we re-up the registration every 3 months. So it'll be October, November, and December. The first October, our theme is going to be exercise for oncology. So another oncology nutrition consultant on our team, Sarah Stratton, she has been to yes. And so she's awesome. And she's going to speak at one of our meetings. We meet twice a month. It's $175. So we try to keep it as affordable as we can for 3 months. There's a lot that you get out of that. It's educational and it's support. It's beautiful. So there's that. We also do one-on-one consulting, and there's 3 of us doing this. We're all highly trained in oncology nutrition consulting, and we love what we do. We really do meet everyone where they are. So I wanted to say about the labs, and I know I'm talking fast, but I don't want you to all think that, oh no, if I'm not going out and getting all my lab work done, then I'm not doing enough. Because oftentimes in this journey, we feel like we're never doing enough. You can never do it all, and that is okay. So if you're inspired to do labs, if you're inspired, and I hope you are, to eat well, that is a really great launching point, right? Yeah. Get out the inflammatory things like the sugars and the processed foods and the junky oils. Eat real whole food, right?
Amen.
Okay. And then my quote that I would leave you with is this: when you change, and this is my favorite Wayne Dyer quote. If you've not heard of Wayne Dyer, he is no longer alive, but he was an amazing inspirational speaker. When you change the things you look at, the things you look at change. Mm. So if you only focus on the bad, what I can't have, the no, that's all you're going to see. But if you focus on what you can do, that is what you will see. And you feel more and more hopeful and more inspired and more in control.
Amen. Amen to that. Love it. How do they find you? At Remission Nutrition, Jen at
Yep, remissionnutrition.com. You can go on. We've got a ton of podcasts that we've been interviewed on. We've got articles. There's a blog now that's coming out once a week. Sign up for our newsletter and you'll get that. If it gets annoying, just take yourself off the newsletter. But we try to give you as much information and good educational things, recipes and all that jazz.
We love you, Jen, and we love you all who are on the call. I just want to say thank you again. We look forward to the next time we're together. I will see you all next month. It is 1:03. We went a couple minutes over, but we're so grateful. Thank you, Jen, for everything. And thanks, ladies, who got me set up. Love being a part of this team. And I'm wishing you nothing but extraordinarily perfect healing. See you next time.